This may be the most asked question that I get, especially by parents. How do I find a good teacher? Now, my answer is maybe you don't. The truth is, information is free and most teachers are useless or worse. Now, it used to be that when I was younger, if you found out that someone was playing, you would ask them, oh, who do you study with? And then they would give you the name of their teacher. And there was the top teachers and then the lesser known teachers, because that's where you would go to get information and guidance, and they would show you how to do things. But anymore, you can get sheet music pretty much everywhere. You can get free instruction on YouTube. And so a teacher can only really provide three things the way that I currently see it. They can provide inspiration, efficiency, and accountability. And you should probably pick a teacher when you need one of those three. The inspiration part can be helpful because you go to your teacher and then you feel inspired to go practice, and the practicing is really where you get better. Efficiency is important, but it's probably overrated. That's when you go in and you're playing something the wrong way, and then they can be like, oh, if you do it this way, it's going to be easier for you in the long run. But there's not as much of that as you would assume. And then the accountability part is real too. I mean, that's why you get a personal trainer if you want to lose weight or work out, because you want to go to someone and have that feeling before you go in of, oh, did I do my stuff? Was I supposed to do my stuff? And then maybe go in and not having done your stuff, press the reset button and get back on track. But when you're looking for a teacher, my recommendation would be that you forget about experience and credentials. If someone is a PhD, that just means that they were a good student, which doesn't necessarily mean they're a good teacher. And if they're a great musician, that's great, but that also doesn't mean that they're necessarily a good teacher. The skills of earning a degree and the skills of becoming a good musician almost have no overlap with the skills of conveying information and inspiring and helping people be efficient and holding them accountable. And unfortunately, being an experienced teacher also doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good teacher. It just means you've stuck with it maybe for longer than you should have. So someone who has a PhD and they've been teaching for 30 years and they put out 4 albums, they're not necessarily a good teacher. Worse yet, a good teacher might not be a good teacher for you. So my best piece of advice is pick a teacher that's a good fit for you. You can find one of those 3 things with them. You're inspired, you feel like you practice more efficiently, and before you go into your lesson, you're hoping that you impress them. And as soon as you don't feel those things, it's probably time to find a different teacher. Whether you've been there for 1 lesson or 5 lessons or 5 years of lessons. Because the teacher that was a good fit for you 3 lessons ago may not even be the same teacher that's a good fit for you right now. So how do you know if a teacher's a good fit for you? I don't know. It depends on what you're wanting out of the lessons. Some teachers, like me, are more into the relational aspect of it. I personally feel like if a student has a relationship with me, they're going to have that accountability thing at a higher level. And so when they come in, they're going to want to impress me more if we have somewhat of a relationship. Also, I just happen to really care about my students and I find people fascinating. So usually the first few minutes of my lessons are me finding out about that person's week and what did you do and what's new and what are you excited about and what are you sad about. And then we'll get into talking about music. For some people, this is really annoying because they've got this money clock that's clicking in their head that every minute they know that they've spent X number of dollars for that minute. And so if we're not talking about music yet, then they're kind of annoyed by it. So maybe you want someone who's less relational and just gets down to business. Maybe you want someone who's going to go the full length of the lesson. Personally, I usually don't. I usually try to end the lesson on a good note. So that usually means as soon as we're getting close to the end of the lesson and they have a big success, I cut off the lesson. I'm like, great job. That's it. That's what you need to practice. Now come back next week. So we might stop 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 minutes early if that's what it takes to end on a good note. But some students might feel really ripped off by my ending early. So the question may not be as much, how do I find a good teacher, as much as it is, what do I want out of a teacher? And if the answer is someone who'll make me better, you probably don't want a teacher. You just want to practice, because that's where you're actually going to get better. And this is what I recommend actually for a lot of my students. When they come in, they're going to be practicing on their own. They don't care about having someone they're accountable to, and they're not impressed by anybody. They just want to get better at their instrument. And so then they come in, I show them, hey, here's the kind of stuff that you should practice, and then call me when you think you need a lesson again. And they may not call me for another week or a month or a year. And this might be the key to a good teacher, if there is such a thing across the board, and that is a teacher that's adaptable, a teacher that will change their teaching style and the content of their teaching based on what it is their student wants. And that's why it's actually important that you communicate with your teacher to whatever degree you're comfortable. I'll admit it's a super awkward conversation to tell your teacher, hey, I know you know more about this topic than I do, but I don't think that you're doing a good job of conveying it to me. But on the other hand, I have had students who left because, for example, I wasn't teaching them enough about reading sheet music. We weren't doing enough sight reading in the lesson. So they went to another teacher that specialized in that. And the truth is, I tried to do that stuff with them and I got serious pushback on it. So I stopped pushing on that and we did other things. And they ended up feeling like they weren't getting enough of it from me. And I had no idea. And that's fine. They found someone they were comfortable with and they were getting the stuff from them. But if I had known, we also could have done that in our lessons too. So that's why today when I'm teaching a lesson, we start out with how are you? How was your week? What's new? How are you feeling? And then we get into how are you feeling about music? How is this instrument serving you? Do you feel like you're appropriately challenged? Because I want to know, is the path that we were on last week still the path that you want to be on this week? Even though I've been in the business long enough that I know when I ask them, how are you feeling about music? They feel like the right answer is, I'm feeling great about music. When the truth is, they may have been feeling for a while now like they're not really enjoying it as much as they thought they were going to. So at this point, I'm supposed to tell you that it's important that you have clear goals when you go into picking a teacher. I also think that's kind of stupid because it's hard to have clear goals about learning something that you haven't learned yet. So maybe just be open to changing your goals as you go, which may mean changing your teachers as you go. Or at least communicating with your teacher about what you've now realized you want out of music. So my most practical piece of advice might be ask for a free trial lesson. And that lesson won't tell you whether or not they're a good fit, but it might tell you if they're a terrible fit, and that would be helpful. But then I would recommend that you continue every lesson after that to see that lesson as a trial lesson as well. And as soon as you realize this teacher's a terrible fit, go looking for a different teacher, or maybe no teacher at all. I will say this one last thing from the teacher perspective though. Just because you regularly go into your lessons and feel like you haven't practiced as much as you should have, or that you're as good as you should be, that's not an indication that you should stop that teacher. In fact, that might be a really good indication that that's a great teacher for you because you still have that feeling of accountability. The truth is, no matter how much you practice, you're always going to go in knowing you could have practiced more. Don't tell them I said this, but there's a good chance you probably practiced more that week than your teacher did. And some weeks are just busier than others. So some weeks students come in and they sit down and they haven't touched the instrument since last time we met. And so our lesson is a big reset button and we spend the time practicing and then remembering how much they love this instrument and they go back home now ready to practice. If they didn't have a lesson scheduled that they paid for, they wouldn't have pressed the reset button and they would have gone on with that indefinitely. So feel it out, see who's a good fit for you, and be confident that if you're practicing, you're getting better, whether you have a teacher or not. You're doing fine as long as you're exploring, messing up, and having fun.